Hey everyone, and welcome to Ben's Almanac, the only show where you can watch being built as it's being built. I'm basically doing home renovations, but for an AI YouTube series. And this is Devlog number 8, which feels both very official and also way too early to be saying numbers out loud. As a reminder, I'm Mac, and this whole channel is about building an educational show where the AI is the one teaching us the decks, the scripts, the workflow, the code, and the goal, the holy grail for me, the presentation itself, the whole thing. And I'm documenting the chaos as I build it out to see how far we can push an AI into feeling like, well, a human, but in a way that's educational and authentic. We took last week off for Thanksgiving, so I hope all my American viewers, the exclusive elite group of roughly five and a quarter people, had a lovely holiday. In the last devlog, we looked at using Microsoft slide templates to keep things consistent, and honestly, that sped up a lot of the early design work. And if you work in PowerPoint at all, like I used to, and weren't using that regularly, I recommend seeing if it solved any use case for you. It's a nice tool. Oh, and before we dive in, new mic. Black Friday wore me down, and also just my last mic was awful. The audio was so bad. I kept trying to fix it every week with like post production and tuning, and it wasn't working. It was a big pain point for my most vocal audience member. Thank you for the feedback. So yeah, this is just like way better. Although to be fair, it's so good now, you might even be able to hear me breathe, which if so, we'll fix later. But I can finally move during recordings without the sound collapsing, even if I'm a little far away. There's like compression, so everything gets closer together, and it's capped out, and there's a little warmth added to it. And yeah, I'm really excited and learned quite a bit about microphones over the last couple of days. Oh, and check this out. We can finally get some depth in here. So low, so light. And then all the way back to normal. Anyway, let me know if it sounds better. Early tests make me feel like a real YouTuber. So, speaking of being a real YouTuber, the obligatory moment of early channels. If you're enjoying these devlogs, or just like watching me slowly assemble a show from scratch, one perfectly placed piece at a time, feel free to like and subscribe. Sorry, it's just for the devlogs. I don't feel like I've really like earned a like and subscribe yet. Like this is as much for me as it is for anyone else who might find it useful. But it does help the algorithm, and we are ramping up. So uh, yeah, please do so. Click basically all the buttons you see except for the thumbs down one. That's the only one to avoid. Okay, back on topic, and I've taken this uh, shoot a couple times now. I feel like I keep running over, so I'm gonna try to keep this tight. Today, I want to talk about the repo, and the repo is a reminder. That's just like a collection of all of your like files where you do scripting and stuff. Specifically, it's like a save point system where it freezes something in time, and so then you can take it, and if you break it, you don't like lose your work forever. This is like before auto saving things on like Google Docs or whatever was standard. It's an old system and really good for collaboration. But that's me getting distracted. So what I wanted to talk about and walk you through was the repo, but specifically how it's like finally starting to look like a real project and not just a place where like you know good planning means I don't have to build anything yet. Too easy to plan well and use it as an excuse to procrastinate. But real progress has been getting made. Been pretty excited about it, and I've picked up some surprisingly useful lessons along the way, especially about using AI coding tools. And even if you're not a software person, and I wouldn't consider myself like that's not really my specialty so much as more the data side. But this is the kind of like workflow stuff that can make your projects go from impossible to actually doable. And that's just really cool that we're in the place. And honestly, watching it come together has been super exciting and occasionally overwhelming, which is like the main point I want to get across today because it makes me want to do 10 other projects at once and also is just like a lot of content thrown at you suddenly. Because when you normally do coding projects, when you're doing it by hand, like you're typing it. And so you have time to sit and think about it and let it soak into your brain as it's being built. But when an AI tool does it, all of a sudden you have a ton of work done really quickly. And so you just went from like theoretical to exact, and that can feel like a jump. And so it's like this devlog isn't about doing all the extra projects and all the cool stuff you can do because you can do cool stuff, but it's about actually making sure you have the habits and tools to execute just that first one effectively. And if you've ever had an idea you wanted to bring into reality or like wanted to code around and feel like you were learning about it and actually learn about it, uh, and you felt blocked because it's just so opaque and there's so much to learn, this era of tooling, this is for you. And I hope this devlog helps just a little bit. So to set some context, I know I'm running long, so I'll try to speed this up. As a quick reminder, vibe coding. We had a presentation a couple of weeks back about this, one of the devlogs. I don't have the fancy go to the link at the screen and go there. That's the future edit, but um, oh, I basically broke it up into the small, the medium, and the large. Uh, all of them are using some these big end models, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, and they handle the technical, tiny details or just raw execution while you focus on the architecture, design, structure, and experience. In this setup, you're the director, and they are the employee, and you get them for pretty cheap when you look at it from that perspective. Now, since that devlog, the tiny micro, the Claude code, which exists in uh, the command line, which is basically that thing you see in movies where somebody's hacking, that's always in the command line. On Mac, it's called a terminal. Um, that was incorporated with an official release into VS Code, Visual Studio Code, which is owned by Microsoft, and that is what I primarily use because it's a very nice, very standard, free IDE or a place to run code from and do text file work. Um, and because it's been there, I got to finally experiment comparing Codex, which is OpenAI's answer the Claude code with Claude Code itself because I didn't want to run it directly from my terminal. I didn't feel comfortable mucking around with something that can break my stuff. I really keep that contained. Um, and I was able to go back and forth and do different segments for each one. Uh, this devlog isn't really about the comparison. Honestly, they feel pretty similar. Cloud Code's better at explaining. OpenAI's currently feels like it's executing more. The models are changing. Doesn't matter. Pick one that you feel comfortable with. Probably Cloud Code to start. If you're just looking to learn. The big realization for me though was whichever tool I used, my own comprehension was the bottleneck. I'd run into little misunderstandings, not because the code was bad, but because I didn't truly understand what the model thought it was doing until I saw the output. And that kept, like, occurring. I, like, asked it to do too much or even in small chunks. I just wasn't, like it was testing enough to know it was working, but not testing in a way that it locked in the structure in my head, and that would lead to mistakes down the line. So, like, I'm on phase 2 again because I did multiple revisions where I went back because I realized that something was not working at a higher level of the plan. And the key that finally broke that cycle after several messy attempts was this: make the AI show its work in a way future you can understand. That's like the biggest takeaway I took from all this. And it doesn't even matter exactly what the best method for you is, so long as you can understand it later. And for me, a design docker build order just it wasn't enough, and I needed something I could run, inspect, validate, and make sure the project was unfolding the way that I thought it was. And that brings us to like the repo itself. And I know this repo is very busy, but this isn't going to be a big hullabaloo about VS Code. I just wanted to draw your attention to like you can see all these docs. In fact, you can see how busy this repo gets, where you have recently changed things, all the documentation here, whatever's open here, the terminal down here, right? You just have like a lot of stuff, and any of these files, if I stop and think about it, I will have a decent guess that's going to be like 80% accurate on what it does, and I'll have a good intuition to get there if I'm confused. The problem is working between the files when new stuff gets added and intuiting that way harder. And so gaps get created, and those gaps compound as more stages work. And so your confusion grows as the project gets more complex. Why exactly something worked in a certain way. And the way I went around doing this is every time the model would execute code, I would have it explain exactly that step and demonstrate it to me in a Jupyter notebook. And a Jupyter notebook, we don't need to go too deep into it. And I think I've mentioned it before. It's like the uh, academic data version of like working from your notebook, but on a computer. And what I mean by that is it works in these little cells. You have like discrete buckets of things, and in those cells, you can paste whatever. Usually, it's going to be text, code, data, or a picture. Those are usually the four categories you'll see super frequently, but it can be other things as well. But what I had to do is I had to make a notebook for me where it explained exactly what the stage was, what the purpose is, how it was going to go about doing this, what the requirements were, right? And then I had to execute that thing. Show me proven examples. Allow me to look at the code, make a small change, run it, and test it. And that's what these cells are for. This is like actual code I can run, and it will give me the output here. And I can see, like what do I expect to see for each of these cells. And then do I actually see that? And does that make sense when I look at this? And like, I've had a ton of mistakes just here at the finder structure because, I was calling the wrong thing or I moved to file or whatever. Like being able to intuitively work with a small segment of code is just way more bite-sized. And being able to do it in small sequence chunks is way easier. And normally, doing that for your own coding projects is both not explicitly necessary, even if it'd be really nice to have for your future self or somebody down the line. But in this case, that cost of time and energy to put it together, the approach is zero because it's just an additional like request in the thing you're already getting the AI to do, and it makes everything so much easier. Like I've redone just phase two twice, and the second time I actually caught it because I saw exactly what was happening at this stage before. I was trying to feed it files that were structured incorrectly and super confusing. And this flow is my strong recommendation. Not necessarily to use Jupyter, although I strongly recommend that, especially if you don't have a preferred way of doing this. But if you want to get involved with it, make the AI include proof of work. Make it not just answer the math problem or circle the multiple choice test, but to actually explain and show to you why it thinks what it thinks is true. Because even if it's right 90% of the time, you're going to catch 10% of those mistakes. And even when it's right, but you misunderstood exactly how it was executing on it, you can catch that for yourself. And sometimes that, even if it's not a wrong way to do it, it's not the way your project works best. And so this was my biggest lesson and takeaway that saved me a lot of pain and suffering. So if people are interested in more comparisons between Codex and Claude Code, Jupyter notebooks or the like, feel free to drop a comment as well. That also boosts the algorithm. But either way, thank you so much for your time this week, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week. See you next one.